and welcome to Open Line. I'm Starlene Stringer. The holidays are certainly a time for fun, but fires are a real concern. The Irving Fire Department wants to make sure you and your loved ones are safe, so they're here to share some valuable information. Viewers are invited to submit questions via email and social media, and we will be getting those answered throughout our show. Our guests are Assistant Chief Rusty Wilson, Fire Marshal Derek Austin, and Battalion Chief Steve Deutsch. He's over Emergency Medical Service. I want to thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Well, this is a great time to have a show like this because it's very much needed. We've had a lot of fires in North Texas lately, whether it be apartment fires or house fires, and that's unfortunately the tradition. There's fires all the time, and they're started by very different reasons. And Rusty, we know that winter brings some cold weather and people start getting out those heaters. What do we need to know before operating a space heater?
Well, obviously there are some safety rules to operating space heaters, and with the weather turning colder, they're going to be more popular and used more. But it's important to note that a space heater should really only be used in a room that's going to be continually occupied. In other words, don't use a space heater and then be going off and leaving it out of the room for an extended period of time. Need to make sure you keep combustibles away from those heaters. It should be a minimum of 36 inches or 3 feet away from any space heaters.
Now you say combustibles, and some people go, oh yeah, we know exactly what he's talking about, but I know others of you are going, what? What is that?
It could be anything, paper products, wood products, things that will combust, that will burn.
I'm a new mom, for example, and I know a lot of the clothes say that these can catch fire, keep, of course, children away. That's important too.
Absolutely. Clothing, especially be aware of children in the room when you're using space heaters. And another thing is with space heaters, be very careful to plug the space heater directly into a receptacle. It shouldn't be, in other words, plugged into a extension cord. Those things tend, since it's a heating element, it tends to pull a lot of amperage, and that can cause a serious problem if they're not plugged directly into the wall. So yes, there are some safety rules that need to be followed.
And this sounds so silly because I know some of you are going, okay, well, why would people even use space heaters? But a lot of people don't have things like fireplaces or maybe heat, and they get space heaters to stay warm, right?
That's correct, and even recently Fort Worth had an issue with a fire that was in a home where there were several space heaters being used. So it's always a potential danger, and it needs to be used very carefully.
Definitely. The next question is for you, Derek, and for those who use fireplaces, there's definitely a safety issue and concern for them as well too.
Absolutely. One of the primary concerns you have with fireplaces is creosote, which is a oil-based soot that builds up on the inside of your chimney. And that is highly flammable. So you want to make sure that your chimney is cleaned every year by a professional company that's certified to do that. As far as basic safety, you only want to burn wood in your fireplace. Don't ever stick Christmas wrapping paper or anything else. Don't use lighter fluid to light your fireplace. That could cause a very bad situation. Just like you can
silly,
have,
but people do these things.
Yeah, they do. And just like everybody probably has a fond memory or a funny joke about a friend who was lighting a grill outside with lighter fluid. Well, and something bad happens. Well, imagine that happening inside your house where you have carpet and other combustibles very close by.
That can be very scary.
Yeah. So again, very important to keep your fire chimney cleaned, because the creosote is, once it catches on fire inside the chimney shaft itself, the heat breaks down the mortar and degrades the brick. So over time, you could actually have a chimney degradation and collapse due to fire. Also on the outside of your home, you want to keep your roof clean of leaves and sticks. You want to have a spark arrestor or a metal screen over the top of your chimney, so that you don't have sparks floating out of the top of the chimney and then landing on those leaves and sticks on top of your house. You could have a fire break out on top of your home and not even be aware of it for a long period of time.
Very interesting. Yes. And I'm listening to you say these things, and probably a lot of people do not have their chimneys cleaned every single year or have what you've described to have on top of their house, and you're saying it's a very dangerous situation and a concern if you don't.
Yeah, and spark arrestors are readily available at Home Depot, Lowe's. They sell those every year. So there's no excuse not to have one.
Are they costly?
honestly, they have many. They have very fancy ones and inexpensive ones. So
And
it's
it doesn't
up to
really
the
matter
chimney.
because it's saving a life.
As long as you have a metal mesh to obstruct the ember from escaping the chimney, that's the most important thing. Also, a lot of chimneys have a glass door front.
Exactly.
When you actually have the fire in your chimney, or I'm sorry, in your fireplace, keep those glass doors open. What happens is if you close the glass doors, they restrict oxygen flow, which causes incomplete combustion. And incomplete combustion is what creates the creosote.
Huh.
So keep the glass doors open, but keep the metal mesh screen, which is often there, keep that closed. It also functions as a spark arrestor to keep the embers and everything from coming out into your home and catching your carpet on fire.
Wow. Okay. So you guys have given us some very important things to think about and consider, and hopefully you'll go out and get the things you need to keep you and your family safe. Now let's talk to you about this, Stephen. Some heaters we know have a problem that can cause like carbon monoxide, for instance. That can be a serious problem with them. How so?
Correct. Well, as Chief Wilson pointed out, a lot of heaters plug in an outlet and those won't cause a problem, but propane or any kind of fuel powered heater generally not designed for indoor use. They need to be in a vented atmosphere, so you have the potential for carbon monoxide poisoning if those are used. At the same time, the biggest issue we have in Irving with carbon monoxide poisoning is from faulty furnaces.
Really?
The one case in particular last year, we had a whole family that ended up going to the hospital for carbon monoxide poisoning. They had recently had some roofing work done, and during the course of the work, the vent pipe from the furnace had been dislodged just enough to cause carbon monoxide, when the furnace was operating, to build up inside the house.
Oh no.
The problem with carbon monoxide is it mimics other illnesses. People complain of dizziness, weakness, headaches, stuff like that.
So those are the symptoms you may
Those
feel?
are the normal symptoms that people have. And a lot of people assume, especially if everybody in the house is having the same symptoms, they've all caught the same thing.
So let's
typically
go over
the
those
flu.
symptoms again. Go a little slower so that people understand what those symptoms are, just in case this ever happens to them.
Typically headache, weakness, dizziness. Some people will have nausea, and it persists. Anything that they do doesn't resolve it. The biggest indicator is if there's multiple members of the family in the house, everybody's complaining of the same symptoms.
Okay.
That's a big clue.
What should you do if you start to notice that your family is dizzy and has all these symptoms you're talking about?
Well, let me back up. The best thing you can do first off, before that ever becomes a situation, is get a carbon monoxide detector installed in the house, and they should be installed next to all the sleeping areas.
Okay.
But if something that occurs, that you don't have a carbon monoxide detector and you suspect there's an issue going on in the house, call the fire department.
Okay.
We have equipment to come in and test the carbon monoxide levels in the house to see if, in fact, there is a problem.
Wonderful. And people oftentimes, I know you're thinking, what's the cost, what's the price? Of course, when it comes to saving a life, it doesn't matter what you have to pay to get those carbon monoxide detectors, but they're very inexpensive. They don't cost much. It's like buying a fire detector, a smoke detector, and they're very small. You put them in your house, and they're protecting your family, right?
That's correct.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about some other things. Rusty, what are some of the other risks, say with candles? We all hear about candles causing fires, especially at this time of the year. They're a very big concern.
That's true, and anything like that with an open flame, of course, is something to be concerned about. Again, it's pretty much the same basic common sense safety principles. It's not a good idea to light candles and then leave the room for extended periods of time. It's not a good idea to have those open flames near anything that can be considered combustible or that would possibly ignite and cause a fire.
And that includes like the holiday decorations. A lot of people think, oh, this is beautiful. They put it out, they go and light the candles, and a lot of those combustibles you're talking about are things that you've decorated around your fireplace or things that are on a panel or a mantle. It can cause a fire.
And Starlene, one of the most combustible things can be a Christmas tree.
Wow.
And so that's something to be very aware of. Actually, a lot of people don't realize, but if you have a live Christmas tree, especially if it gets dried out, the sap that's within that tree can actually act as a combustible.
Yeah, we're showing a video of it right now, and it just in 15, 16, 17 seconds, look at the size of the fire that can create.
Absolutely.
Terrifying.
It acts as a propellant.
Wow.
And so you have to be very aware of that when this time of year it's traditional that we have a lot of lighting decorations and candles and different kinds of decorations. Those all are
Yeah.
potential hazards.
Exactly, and I'm glad you mentioned decorations. Let's let you talk about that a bit, Derek. I know that Christmas lights are the next thing you think about when you see a Christmas tree like that. Just putting those Christmas lights out, you always wonder, should I leave those on all night? You know, you're sleeping, or should I turn those off? Christmas lights are a very real concern when it comes to causing fires.
Yes, they are. The National Fire Protection Agency keeps totals or averages on fires caused by Christmas decorations or other holiday decorations. On average, there's about 240 fires caused by Christmas trees and another 150 fires caused by Christmas lights every year.
Wow.
Which results in, on average, of about 21 deaths per year and $25 million in damage.
Wow.
So it is a major concern, and there are some simple things you can do regarding Christmas lights to protect your home. First off is when you're installing these lights, never connect more than 3 strands together at once.
Oh, you should talk to my mom.
Always do a
gotta tell
visual
her.
inspection of your wiring,
Okay.
because if it's kinked in multiple places, or the insulation is frayed, you know, maybe you store the lights up in the attic
For years and
for years,
years,
and squirrels
yeah.
get in there and they like to chew on rubber and plastic. So
Mhm.
you need to visually inspect these things before you plug them in. Also, use a ground fault circuit interrupter. They have indoor and outdoor.
Okay, break that down.
Okay.
What?
For the purposes of this show, a ground fault circuit interrupter, you just need to know that you plug it into an outlet
Okay.
and then you plug in your lights. And if anything happens in the circuitry of the light, that ground fault circuit interrupter will disconnect the power, and it protects your outlet.
Okay, so for the people out there like me who are going, what in the world, and where do we get it? Where do you just go to like a Home Depot or a Lowe's and say, I want a ground
any
fault
hardware store, Lowe's, Home
interrupter?
Depots, they'll have those. And
Okay.
Walmart will have those. Almost any retailer will probably have those this time of year. Any
Okay.
place that sells Christmas
You can
lights.
tell I don't have one, that I need to get one.
Okay.
Thank y'all for the advice.
Sure.
So
Sure,
that's
I would
something.
highly recommend that. Yeah, and let's see what else. I think that's pretty much the
It-
key things that you need to really hone in on Christmas lights.
Well, it's that time where people are getting ready to put them out, and some people already have them out,
Yeah.
so I'm glad you're giving this advice. And putting them out is a big concern. So let's ask Stephen about the potential of falls, because when you're hanging those lights up there, getting up on these ladders in high places, people get injured by doing that too.
Quite frequently. In fact, falls is probably one of the more common calls that our paramedics respond to virtually every day. Whether they're using a ladder improperly, putting up lights inside or outside the house. Actually, the biggest issue with our falls occur inside the house off of ladders. Just a couple of interesting little tidbits. Most hip fractures, for example, almost 95% of them are a result of falls. And the problem is that a lot of hip fractures or those falls are easily prevented by just taking care of certain things around the house. For example, throw rugs. Electrical cords, like from Christmas trees, that are in place when people don't normally expect them to be there.
Oh, I see.
We get in the holiday season and families are coming to visit. There's lots of children that come over. So toys and small children are something that, especially with the elderly, aren't accustomed to being around. And that can cause problems. About 250,000 people get hospitalized every year for hip fractures.
Wow, that's a lot.
And 1 in 5 of them will actually die as complications of that within a year. The older you get, the more
harder.
prone you are to it. Women are 3/4 more, or 75% more likely than men because of some of the issues with osteoporosis and things like that. But like I said, there's a lot of things you can do to prevent it, and it's looking for those issues around the house. One of the easiest, or one of the most common places that we deal with falls are bathrooms. Installing grab bars around commodes, showers, stuff like that. Medications is another big problem that we deal with. People get on new medications, it may cause them dizziness or lightheadedness, and that may not be all the time, but as their body gets accustomed to it, and they need to be aware of that, so that when they take the medications, they're taking appropriate precautions.
So those warnings are very important that we see
Extremely
on those
important,
medication
yeah.
boxes. Thank you for that information. And Rusty, I want to come back to you because another thing that people are doing this time of the year, cooking. And I know that presents a very serious fire danger too.
It does. And my family will be doing a lot of cooking and baking this year too.
We're coming over.
So let's talk about some of the preventive actions first that we can take. First of all, have a smoke detector installed close to the kitchen
Okay.
so that you can be alerted if there is an issue. Keep those cooktops clean, because cooktops as well as ovens, the buildup of grease and so forth can be an issue.
I was going to say, why is that? But okay.
It can be a problem when it comes to fire hazards. Anything, pot holders, food wrappings, that sort of thing, you want to keep away from ignition sources such as cooktops and ovens. But if you do all the preventive actions and in spite of everything you happen to have an oven fire, keep the door closed on the oven. Call the fire department. Don't try to pull something out of the oven and make it to the sink.
Really? So just don't even, if it
Just
stays in there?
keep the door closed.
And will that keep the fire contained? Or?
Well, will keep it somewhat contained and buy you time so you can call the fire department. People get injured a lot trying to take hot pans
They're
or
trying
pots
to save that
to,
turkey.
They're
They're
trying
like,
to
wait,
get
my
to
turkey.
get to the kitchen sink with it, and they end up burned. Or because it's so hot, they drop it.
Oh.
And there's so
Fire
many
gets
other
bigger.
problems that can exist because of trying to do that. So
Oh,
the
no.
best thing is just to keep the oven door closed, call the fire department, and we can deal with it.
Okay, good advice. Y'all are the experts. I was wondering, why in the world would you do that? But it makes perfectly good sense once you've explained it. And I was telling you before the show that I personally had an experience with the grill too, because this is Texas, and let's face it, some of you will be grilling even at this time of the year. It's cold outside, but we still like barbecue. So if you go outside to the grill, and if you have one of that you click on there, the electric grills, and you turn it on, if you hear it click and it doesn't light and you shut that door, there's a good chance that there's going to be a problem when you open that door again, right?
That's absolutely correct. People need to be very careful when they're grilling outside and using the propane type grills. If that thing does not light, and usually the newer models now anyway have the electronic igniters on them. If you hear that thing clicking but it's not lighting, you need to turn the burner off, turn that source of that propane off, and find out why it's not lighting. And a situation we talked about earlier, one of our firefighters had been trying to light a grill, and it didn't light. He turned the burners off and left the top of the grill open. But what a lot of people don't realize, there's a lot of different gases that are heavier than air.
Right, because you would think it'd be fine if you left the top open.
You would think it would vent, right?
Yeah.
It didn't. It settled into the area where the double doors were at the bottom of it. Correct. And he came out a while later, after giving it plenty of time to vent, you would think. And then when he tried to light it, that he actually experienced an explosion and was burned quite badly. So that's something you need to be aware of.
Chief Wilson, as long as we're talking about cooking fires, you might want to touch on something else with Thanksgiving right around the corner, the turkey fryers.
Oh, that's a good topic to bring up. Turkey fryers. Tell us about that too, because where do people put them? You want to talk about that? People just put them anywhere sometime. I know my husband's guilty of that. I see him, he'll go out in the driveway and just start cooking. I'm like, is that safe?
Certainly you want to be aware of where you have it located in relation to it being an open area. It needs to be an open area that's well ventilated. Don't suggest doing that up in the garage.
Right.
That's not a good idea. And certainly not doing it indoors. Again, if you have an issue with it, you're talking about a turkey fryer now that's quite full of grease.
Sure. And
you have the potential for grease fires and so forth. So a lot of potential for danger there also.
Definitely.
Let me add a little bit here.
Please do.
With whether you're cooking on a stovetop or with a turkey deep fryer, you're going to have grease fires. Everybody, any time of the year, it doesn't have to be a holiday. And we have a lot of cooking fires in Irving. There are some simple things you can do. If you feel you are capable of attempting to fight the fire, I don't want to take away from what Chief Wilson said, because the best thing to do actually is to get out and call the fire department. But if you feel that you are capable of attempting to fight the fire in the incipient stage, which is the very beginning stage,
Right.
then I recommend that you have a fire extinguisher. Okay, and there's a classification of fire extinguisher. It's an A, B, C fire extinguisher. It's easy to remember. You can buy them at any hardware store, and they're not really that expensive. I recommend you have one. Also, if you don't have a fire extinguisher, you can use baking soda
Okay.
on a grease fire, okay? But never use flour.
Really?
Flour, once it reaches the correct air mixture, can actually explode.
Oh, wow. You guys have
Okay.
given us some very good information today. I hope you were taking notes on that and remember those things, at least mentally. Something else we want to find out about when we're talking about all the potentials that can happen over the holidays, not just the fires, but actually food poisoning. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Stephen? What are the risks of food poisoning?
Well, food poisoning is something that we deal with, is not that common, but in the hospitals I see a lot of it. And the biggest cause, obviously, is just poor preparation of surfaces for food and not cooking things to the right temperature or leaving certain things out that need to be refrigerated. The best thing people can do is actually read the directions when they're cooking things, and you can get the little thermometers that you can stick in, whether it's turkey or ham, stuff like that, to make sure it's cooked to the correct temperature. When cutting things, especially like chicken, not using the same knife and cutting surface for cutting vegetables or fruits, stuff like that, that cross-contamination
Good advice.
without cleaning it. And then thoroughly cleaning down like counter surfaces after you've done everything.
Things that you think are common sense, but I'm glad you're reminding us because sometimes people just forget to do it. Another thing we want to talk about, we're talking about food, we've talked about fires, let's talk about drinking. Stephen, the truth is there's going to be a lot of people drinking and driving. It's something you say year in, year out, day in, day out, don't do it. But people do it and it causes big problems.
That's true. I think one of the big misconceptions, and there's actually been some public service broadcasts recently I've heard on the radio. And people say, well, I'm not drunk, I was just a little buzzed. Buzz is impaired. And when somebody's impaired, they're not going to be able to respond to traffic conditions like they would if they hadn't been drinking. The bottom line is just, don't do it. If you're going to go out and have a good time, make sure there's somebody there to either give you a ride home or arrange for that after the fact.
Good advice. And Rusty, let's talk about this too. I know the fire department has a new dispatch system. Tell us about the benefits of it.
Well, this is actually the dispatch system is incorporating a new software right now. It's a company formerly known as En-Route. It's now called N4. And it's simply we call it a CAD system, a computer-aided dispatch system, so that when we get a call, the computer is able to match up our resources that we need to dispatch to whatever the emergency is. If it's a structure fire, then that CAD, or computer-aided dispatch system, that software, will match that address with the corresponding district and the corresponding engines and trucks and MICUs or ambulances that need to be dispatched to that structure fire.
I see.
And so it aids us in being able to promptly dispatch, and is a great enhancement as far as time is concerned, because time is of the essence and seconds count for us in our business.
Definitely. We got to see a little video of that while you were describing it to us, so that was very helpful to see. Something else that's helpful is knowing when to call 911. Stephen, I want you to address that, because I know oftentimes we say, call 911 when there's a fire anytime, but when there's a medical emergency, someone's sick, say, when do we know it's time to call 911? Not particularly fires, but when it's medical.
Well, the primary ones are going to be the big stuff. Somebody who's unconscious, difficulty breathing, having chest pain or chest pressure, symptoms of a stroke. Obviously, we want somebody to call right away. We get calls for everything and anything under the sun.
I bet.
And a lot of them are not emergencies. One of the big misconceptions a lot of people still have is if I come to the hospital by ambulance, I'll get seen sooner. That is no longer the case. The hospitals are going to assess that person when they come in the door and treat them accordingly. No different than if they walk through the front door. So bottom line, it's not so much when to call, it's when you really shouldn't call. If you have a means of getting to the hospital by private vehicle for a minor injury or minor illness, that really is a more appropriate way so that the emergency services are available for people who might actually need them. But like I said, the big ones, difficulty breathing, chest pains, strokes, severe bleeding, like that, by all means. And if there's a doubt, call us. Doesn't mean you have to go with us, but you've got trained people who are going to be there within minutes to help you make the correct decision as to what's best for you.
And we're so grateful when you guys do respond. Another thing that people have been asking us about is, okay, so I call 911 and you're wanting an ambulance to come and the fire truck gets there first. Let's ask Derek. Derek, why is that? Why does the fire truck often get there before the ambulance?
I think Chief Wilson would actually be a
Wonderful.
better person to answer that question.
That is a question that we hear a lot of times too. I'm not surprised that you all are hearing it. And the answer is really very simple. We have a premier EMS system in the Irving Fire Department, one that we're very proud of. And we have what's called ALS, which is Advanced Life Support,
Okay.
on all of our apparatus, so that we then have paramedics that are on engines and
Okay.
aerial trucks and so forth. So especially when you consider we have 8 frontline ambulances.
Mm-hmm.
Those ambulances can get very busy and be running all over town. So if one ambulance is out of district, say their normal district that they cover, another ambulance may be called to come into that district. One of the bordering districts may come in to back up or support that ambulance that's already on a call. Now, if we get a call then in the meantime,
Right.
and say an out-of-district ambulance may be coming into that district, it's very likely we're going to send an engine or a truck, whatever the appropriate would be in the
So
house.
basically, whoever's responding, the fire truck, they have someone there that can help you until the ambulance gets there.
Absolutely.
So that's reassuring.
We have ALS medications. We can start CPR. We can push the first round of cardiac meds.
So it's a team effort.
Absolutely. So
Awesome.
when those seconds are counting, if it's major trauma, major accident, if it's a call for a heart attack or
Right.
respiratory issue, something of that nature, where again seconds are counting, we're going to send them we're going to respond with an engine or an aerial truck as well as an ambulance. And basically that engine, say, that gets there can do everything but transport
Good,
that
good,
patient,
good.
but they can start everything else.
Wonderful. So that's good, and that's comforting and reassuring for you, I'm sure. And before we go, we're just about out of time, but I do want to talk to Derek about something that's going on at this time of the year, and that is called Blue Christmas. Can you tell us about it briefly?
Sure. Blue Christmas started about 30 years ago, and it's a group effort between the police department, the fire department, and Irving School District is also involved in it. And the school district gives us a list of children who are in need, and starting at the end of, or right at the end of the Thanksgiving holiday for that full month into December, volunteers from the CFA and the community and fire departments, police department, we all work together to collect food and gifts for the children in the homes that are provided to us from the Irving Independent School District. And it all culminates in that last week leading up to Christmas, where police vehicles, fire department vehicles, volunteers all work together to get these products distributed to the appropriate families.
I love it. So it's called Blue Christmas, but it really makes sure that children do not have a blue Christmas. They have a
Absolutely.
bright Christmas.
And there
because
is a
of your help.
website. It's www.policeandfirebluechristmas.org.
And so people can get involved by going there and doing what? They can donate?
Well, there's
or?
a calendar there where you can keep up with events, and there's the pancake breakfast. I don't know the exact date of that.
Okay.
That people can take part in and get involved. Yeah.
One thing that's very important to note is that through Blue Christmas and the joint effort of police and fire, we're able to take care of approximately 400 families.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a big help to those folks. But we work with early development and elementary school counselors to get those names. And I say that because a lot of times people come to police stations or fire stations in an effort to get their name on the list, and that's not how we get those names. So to avoid that, I wanted to make sure we got that out there.
So Rusty, tell me, what are some of the ways that you guys are getting people involved with Blue Christmas? You have different events coming up, right?
We do have some events coming up December the 7th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. down at Heritage Park. We do have a chili cook-off. All people are invited to come and welcome to attend that. Then on December the 14th at Plymouth Park Baptist Church, we'll have a pancake breakfast.
Oh, wow.
The times for that is from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. We are out of time, but Rusty, Derek, Stephen, thank you all so much for being here, telling us how to stay safe over the winter holidays and how to have good food without having any big problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching this edition of Open Line. I'm Starlene Stringer. Please be sure to join us on Thursday, December 5th at 1:30 p.m. for our next edition of Open Line. We will continue our discussion of holiday safety with a focus on drunken driving. If you have questions, go ahead and get those in by emailing ictn@cityofirving.org or connect with us on Facebook. That's on our next edition of Open Line. We'll see you then.